beer. Don't you girls each have a talent? Can you belly dance? I told him I didn't have such talents, and whatever gift I had in the past was gone now, as I was suffering from an unknown illness. The boss would have killed me if she heard me say such things to a client, but I didn't care. The truth was, I secretly hoped Baibars would spend the night with another girl. But, to my disappointment, Baibars shrugged and said he didn't care. Then he took out his pouch, spilled a reddish-brown substance from it into his palm, and popped it into his mouth, chewing slowly. "Do you want some?" he asked. I shook my head. I knew what it was. "You don't know what you are missing." He grinned as he reclined on the bed, drifting away from his own body into a stupor of cannabis. That evening, high on beer and cannabis, Baibars bragged about the terrible things he had seen on the battlefields. Even though Genghis Khan was dead and his flesh decomposed, his ghost still accompanied the Mongol armies, Baibars said. Egged on by the ghost, the Mongol army was attacking caravans, plundering villages, and massacring women and men alike. He told me about the Veil of Silence, as soft and peaceful as a blanket on a cold winter night, that descended upon a battlefield after hundreds had been killed and wounded, and dozens more were about to give up their last breath. The silence that follows a massive disaster is the most peaceful sound you can hear on the surface of the world, he said, his voice slurring. It sounds so sad, I murmured. Suddenly he had no more words inside him. There was nothing else to talk about. Grabbing my arm, he pushed me onto the bed and pulled off my robe. His eyes were bloodshot, his voice hoarse, and his smell was a repugnant mixture of cannabis, sweat, and hunger. He entered me in one harsh, abrasive thrust. I tried to move aside and relax my thighs to lessen the pain, but he pressed both hands on my bosom with such force that it was impossible to budge. He kept rocking back and forth even long after he came inside me, like a string puppet that was manipulated by unseen hands and could not possibly stop. Clearly dissatisfied, he kept moving with such roughness that I feared he was going to get hard again, but then suddenly it all came to an end. Still on top of me, he looked at my face with pure hatred, as if the body that had aroused him a moment ago now disgusted him. "Put something on," he ordered as he rolled aside. I put on my robe, watching out of the corner of my eye as he popped more cannabis into his mouth. "From now on, I want you to be my mistress," he said with his jaw jutting out. It wasn't all that uncommon for clients to come up with such demands. I knew how to handle these delicate situations, giving the client the false impression that I would love to be his mistress and serve solely him, but for that to happen he had to spend a lot of money and make the patron happy first. But today I didn't feel like pretending. "I can't be your mistress," I said. "I am going to leave this place very soon." Baibars guffawed as if this were the funniest thing he had ever heard. "You can't do that," he said with certainty. I knew I shouldn't be quarreling with him, but I couldn't help it. "You and I are not that different. We both have done things in the past that we deeply regret. But you have been made a security guard, thanks to your uncle's position. I have no uncle backing me, you see." Baibars' face became wooden, and his eyes, cold and distant up till now, suddenly widened with fury. Dashing forward, he grabbed me by the hair. "I was nice to you, wasn't I?" he growled. "Who do you think you are?" I opened my mouth to say something, but a sharp stab of pain silenced me. Baibars punched me in the face and pushed me against the wall. It wasn't the first time. I had been beaten by clients before, but never this badly. I fell on the floor, and then Baibars started to kick me hard in the ribs and legs while hurling insults at me. It was then and there that I had the strangest experience. As I cringed in pain, my body crushed under the weight of each blow, my soul, or what felt like it separated from my body, turning itself into a kite, light and free. Soon I was floating in the ether. As if thrown into a peaceful vacuum where there was nothing to resist and nowhere to go, I simply hovered. I passed over recently harvested wheat fields, where the wind fluttered the headscarves of peasant girls, and at night, fireflies glinted here and there like fairy lights. It felt like falling, except falling upward into the bottomless sky. Was I dying? If this was what death was like, it wasn't terrifying at all. My worries diminished. I had tumbled into a place of absolute lightness and purity, a magic zone where nothing could pull me down. And suddenly I realized I was living my fear, and, to my surprise, it wasn't frightful. Wasn't it because of the fear of being harmed that I had been scared to leave the brothel all this time? If I could manage not to be scared of death, I realized with an expanding heart, I could leave this rat hole. Shams of Tabriz was right. The only filth was the filth inside. I shut my eyes and imagined this other me, pristine and penitent and looking much younger, walking out of the brothel and into a new life. Glowing with youth and confidence, this was what my face would have looked like if only I'd experienced security and love in my life. The vision was so alluring and so very real, despite the blood before my eyes and the throbbing in my ribs, that I couldn't help smiling. Kimaya. Konya, January 1246. Blushing and sweating slightly, I mustered the courage to talk to Shams of Tabriz. I had been meaning to ask him about the deepest reading of the Quran, but for weeks I hadn't had a chance. Though we lived under the same roof, our paths never crossed. But this morning as I was sweeping the courtyard, Shams appeared next to me, alone and in the mood to chat. And this time not only did I manage to talk with him longer, but I also managed to look him in the eye. "How is it going, dear Kimaya?" he asked jovially. I couldn't help noticing that Shams looked dazed, as if he had just woken up from sleep, or else another vision. I knew he had been having visions, lately more often than ever, and by now I had learned to read the signs. Each time he had a vision, his face became pale and his eyes dreamy. "A storm is impending," Shams murmured, squinting at the sky, where greyish flakes swirled, heralding the first snow of the year. This seemed the right time to ask him the question I had been holding inside. "Remember when you told me that we all understood the Quran in accordance with the depth of our insight?" I said carefully. "Ever since then I have been meaning to ask you about the fourth level." Now Shams turned toward me, his gaze raking my face. I liked it when he stared at me so attentively. I thought he was his handsomest at times like this, his lips pursed, his forehead slightly creased. "The fourth level is unspeakable," he said. "There is a stage after which language fails us. When you step into the zone of love, you won't need language." "I wish I could step into the zone of love someday," I blurted, but then instantly felt embarrassed. "I mean, so that I could read the Quran with deeper insight." An odd little smile edged Shams's mouth. "If you have it in you, I am sure you will. You'll dive into the fourth current, and then you'll be the stream." I had forgotten this mixed feeling that only Shams was capable of stirring in me. Next to him I felt both like a child learning life anew and like a woman ready to nurture life inside my womb. "What do you mean, if you have it in you?" I asked. "You mean, like destiny?" "Yes, that's right." Shams nodded. "But what does destiny mean?" "I cannot tell you what destiny is. All I can tell you is what it isn't. In fact, there is another rule regarding this question. Destiny doesn't mean that your life has been strictly predetermined. Therefore, to leave everything to fate and to not actively contribute to the music of the universe is a sign of sheer ignorance. The music of the universe is all-pervading and it is composed on 40 different levels. Your destiny is the level where you will play your tune. You might not change your instrument, but how well to play is entirely in your hands. I must have given him a befuddled look, for Shams felt the need to explain. He placed his hand on mine, gently squeezing. With dark, deep eyes glinting he said, "Allow me to tell you a story." And here is what he told me. One day a young woman asked a dervish what fate was about. "Come with me," the dervish said. "Let us take a look at the world together." Soon they ran into a procession. A killer was being taken to the plaza to be hanged. The dervish asked, "That man will be executed. But is that because somebody gave him the money with which he bought his murder weapon, or is it because nobody stopped him while he was committing the crime, or is it because someone caught him afterward? Where is the cause and effect in this case?" I interjected, cutting his story short, and said, "That man is going to be hanged because what he did was awful. He is paying for what he did. There is the cause and there, too, the effect. There are good things and bad things, and a difference between the two." "Ah, sweet Kaimaya," Shams replied, in a small voice as if he suddenly felt tired. "You like distinctions because you think they make life easier. What if things are not that clear all the time? But God wants us to be clear. Otherwise there would be no notions of haram or halal. There would be no hell and heaven. Imagine if you could not scare people with hell or encourage them with heaven. The world would be a whole lot worse." Snowflakes skittered in the wind, and Shams leaned forward to pull my shawl tighter. For a passing moment, I stood frozen, inhaling his smell. It was a mixture of sandalwood and soft amber with a faint, crisp tang underneath, like the smell of earth after the rain. I felt a warm glow in the pit of my stomach and a wave of desire between my legs. How embarrassing it was, and yet, oddly, not embarrassing at all. "In love, boundaries are blurred," said Shams, staring at me half compassionately, half concernedly. Was he talking about the love of God or the love between a woman and a man? Could he be referring to us? Was there such a thing as us unaware of my thoughts? Shams continued. "I don't care about haram or halal. I'd rather extinguish the fire in hell and burn heaven, so that people could start loving God for no other reason than love. You shouldn't go around saying such things. People are mean." "Not everyone would understand," I said, not realizing that I would have to think more about this warning before its full implications could sink in. Shams smiled a brave, almost valiant smile. I allowed him to hold me captive, his palm feeling hot and heavy against mine. "Perhaps you are right, but don't you think that gives me all the more reason to speak my mind? Besides, narrow-minded people are deaf anyhow. To their sealed ears, whatever I say is sheer blasphemy. Whereas to me everything you say is only sweet." Shams looked at me with a disbelief that verged on astonishment. But I was more shocked than he was. How could I have said such a thing? Had I taken leave of my senses, I must have been possessed by a jinn or something. "I'm sorry, I'd better go now," I said as I jumped to my feet. My cheeks burning with shame, my heart pounding with all the things we had said and left unsaid, I scampered out of the courtyard back into the house. But even as I ran, I knew that a threshold had been crossed. After this moment I could not ignore the truth that I had known all along. I was in love with Shams of Tabriz. Shams. Konya, January 1246. Bad-mouthing one another is second nature to many people. I heard the rumors about me. Ever since I came to Konya, there have been so many of them. It doesn't surprise me. Although it clearly says in the Quran that slandering is one of the gravest sins ever, most people make hardly any effort to avoid it. They always condemn those who drink wine, or are on the lookout for adulterous women to stone, but when it comes to gossiping, which is a far more serious sin in the eyes of God, they take no notice of any wrongdoing. All of this reminds me of a story. One day a man came running to a Sufi and said, panting, "Hey, they are carrying trays, look over there." The Sufi answered calmly, "What is it to us? Is it any of my business?" "But they are taking those trays to your house." The man exclaimed. "Then is it any of your business?" the Sufi said. Unfortunately, people always watch the trays of others. Instead of minding their own business, they pass judgment on other people. It never ceases to amaze me the things they fabricate. Their imagination knows no limits when it comes to suspicion and slander. Apparently there are people in this town who believe that I am the secret commander of the assassins. Some go so far as to claim that I am the son of the last Ismaili Imam of Alamut. They say I am so skilled in black magic and witchcraft that whomever I curse will die on the spot. Some others even make the outrageous accusation that I have put a spell on Rumi. Just to make sure he doesn't break the spell, I force him to drink snake soup every day at dawn. When I hear such claptrap, I laugh and walk away. What else is there to do? What harm comes to a dervish from the sourness of others? If the whole world were swallowed by the sea, what would it matter to a duck? Nevertheless, I can see that the people around me are worried, particularly Sultan Walid. He is such a bright young man. I am sure someday soon he will become his father's best aide. And then there is Kaimaya, sweet Kaimaya. She, too, seems concerned. But the worst thing about the gossip is that Rumi gets his share of vilification. Unlike me, he isn't used to being bad-mouthed by others. It torments me to see him distressed over the words of ignorant people. Maulana has immense beauty inside. I, on the other hand, have both beauty and ugliness. It is easier for me to deal with the ugliness of others than it is for him, but how can an erudite scholar who is used to having serious conversations and logical conclusions handle the claptrap of ignorant people? No wonder the Prophet Muhammad said, "In this world take pity on three kinds of people. The rich man who has lost his fortune, the well-respected man who has lost his respectability, and the wise man who is surrounded by ignorance." And yet I can't help thinking that there could be some good for Rumi in all this. Slander is a hurtful, albeit necessary, element in Rumi's inner transformation. His whole life he has been admired, respected, and imitated, having a reputation beyond reproach. He doesn't know how it feels to be misunderstood and criticized by others. Nor has he been pestered by the sort of vulnerability and loneliness that one feels from time to time. His ego has not been bruised, not even slightly damaged, by other people. But he needs that. As hurtful as it is, being slandered is ultimately good for one on the path. It is rule number 30. The true Sufi is such that even when he is unjustly accused, attacked, and condemned from all sides, he patiently endures, uttering not a single bad word about any of his critics. A Sufi never apportions blame. How can there be opponents or rivals or even others when there is no self in the first place? How can there be anyone to blame when there is only one? Ella. Northampton, June 17, 2008. Beloved Ella, you were kind enough to ask me to tell you more. Frankly, I do not find it easy to write about this period of my life, for it brings back unwanted memories. But here it is. After Margot's death, my life underwent a dramatic change. Losing myself in a circle of addicts, becoming a regular at all-night parties and dance clubs in an Amsterdam I had never known before, I looked for comfort and compassion in all the wrong places. I became a night creature, befriended the wrong people, woke up in strangers' beds, and lost more than 25 pounds in just a few months. The first time I sniffed heroin, I threw up and got so sick I couldn't keep my head up the whole day. My body had rejected the drug. It was a sign, but I was in no state to see it. Before I knew it, I had replaced sniffing with injections. Marijuana, hashish, acid, cocaine. I tried whatever I could get my hands on. It didn't take me long to make a mess of myself, mentally and physically. Everything I did to stay high. And when high I planned spectacular ways to kill myself. I even tried hemlock, in the manner of Socrates, but either its poison didn't have an effect on me or the dark herb I bought at the back door of a Chinese takeout was some ordinary plant. Perhaps they sold me some kind of green tea and had a laugh at my expense. Many mornings I woke up in unfamiliar places with someone new by my side, but with the same emptiness eating me up inside. Women took care of me. Some were younger than me, others much older. I lived in their houses, slept in their beds, stayed in their summer resorts, ate the food they cooked, wore their husbands' clothes, shopped with their credit cards, and refused to give them even a speck of the love they demanded and no doubt deserved. The life I had chosen quickly took its toll. I lost my job, I lost my friends, and finally I lost the apartment Margot and I had spent many happy days in. When it became apparent that I couldn't bear this lifestyle anymore, I stayed in squat houses where everything was collective. I spent more than 15 months at one squat house in Rotterdam. There were no doors in the building, neither outside nor inside, not even in the bathroom. We shared everything. Our songs, dreams, pocket money, drugs, food, beds. Everything but the pain. Years into a life of drugs and debauchery, I hit rock bottom, a shadow of the man I used to be. As I was washing my face one morning, I stared into the mirror. I had never seen anybody so young who was so drained and sad. I went back to bed and cried like a child. The same day I rummaged through the boxes where I kept Margot's belongings. Her books, clothes, records, hairpins, notes, pictures. One by one, I bade farewell to every keepsake. Then I put them back in boxes and gave them away to the children of the immigrants she cared so deeply about. It was 1977. With the help of God-sent connections, I found a job at a well-known travel magazine as a photographer. This is how I embarked on a journey to North Africa with a canvas suitcase and a framed picture of Margot, running away from the man I had become. Then a British anthropologist I met in the Saharan Atlas gave me an idea. He asked me if I had ever considered being the first Western photographer to sneak into the holiest cities of Islam. I didn't know what he was talking about. He said there was a Saudi law that strictly forbade non-Muslims from entering Mecca and Medina. No Christians or Jews were allowed, unless one found a way to break into the city and take pictures. If caught, you could go to jail, or even worse. I was all ears. The thrill of trespassing into forbidden territory, achieving what no one else had accomplished before, the surge of adrenaline, not to mention the fame and money that would come at the end. I was attracted to the idea like a bee drawn to a pot of honey. The anthropologist said I could not do this alone and needed a connection. He suggested checking the Sufi brotherhoods in the area. You never know, they might agree to help, he said. I didn't know anything about Sufism, and I couldn't have cared less. As long as they offered to help, I was happy to meet the Sufis. To me they were just a means to an end. But then, at the time, so was everyone and everything else. Life is odd, Ella. In the end I never made it to Mecca or Medina. Not then, not later. Not even after I converted to Islam. Destiny took me on a different route altogether, one of unexpected twists and turns, each of which changed me so profoundly and irrevocably that after a while the original destination lost its significance. Though motivated by purely materialistic reasons at the outset, when the journey came to an end, I was a transformed man. As for the Sufis, who could have known that what I had initially seen as a means to an end would very soon become an end in itself. This part of my life I call my encounter with the letter U in the word Sufi. Love, Aziz Desert Rose the Harlot. Konya, February 1246. Bitter and bleak, the day I left the brothel was the coldest day in 40 years. The narrow, serpentine streets glistened with fresh snow, and sharp pendants of ice hung from the roofs of the houses and the minarets of the mosques in dangerous beauty. By mid-afternoon the chill had become so severe there were frozen cats on the streets with whiskers turned into thin threads of ice, and several ramshackle houses collapsed under the weight of the snow. After the street cats, Konya's homeless suffered the most. There were half a dozen frozen bodies all curled up in the fetal position with beatific smiles on their faces, as if expecting to be reborn into a better and warmer life. Late in the afternoon, when everyone was taking a nap before the hustle of the evening began, I sneaked out of my room. I took no more than a few simple clothes, leaving behind all the silk garments and accessories I used to wear for special customers. Whatever was earned in the brothel had to stay in the brothel. Halfway down the stairs, I saw Magnolia standing at the main door, chewing the brown leaves she was addicted to. Older than all the other girls in the brothel, lately she had been complaining about hot flashes. At night I heard her toss and turn in bed. It was no secret that her womanhood was drying up. Younger girls jokingly said they envied Magnolia, since she would not have to worry about having periods, pregnancies, or abortions anymore and could sleep with a man every single day of the month, but we all knew that an aged prostitute had little chance of survival. As soon as I saw Magnolia standing there, I knew I had only two options: either return to my room and forget about running away or walk through that door and bear the consequences. My heart chose the latter. "Hey, Magnolia, are you feeling better?" I said, adopting what I hoped was a relaxed and casual tone of voice. Magnolia's face brightened but then darkened again as she noticed the bag in my hand. There was no point in lying. She knew that the patron had forbidden me to leave my room, never mind leaving the brothel. "Are you leaving?" Magnolia gasped as if the question scared her. I didn't say anything. Now it was her turn to make a choice. She could either stop me in my tracks and alert everyone to my plan or simply let me go. Magnolia stared at me, her expression grave and embittered. "Go back to your room, Desert Rose," she said. "The patron will send Jackalhead after you. Don't you know what he did to?" But she didn't finish her sentence. That was one of the unwritten rules in the brothel. We didn't bring up the stories of the unfortunate girls who had worked here before us and had met a premature end, and on those rare occasions when we did mention them, we took care not to utter their names. There was no point in disturbing them in their graves. They had already led tough lives, it was better to let them rest. "Even if you manage to escape, how are you going to make a living?" Magnolia insisted. "You will starve to death." What I saw in Magnolia's eyes was fear, not the fear that I could fail and be punished by the patron, but the fear that I might succeed. I was going to do the one thing she had always dreamed about and yet never dared to carry out, and now she both respected and hated me for my audacity. I felt a momentary pang of doubt and would have gone back had the voice of Shams of Tabriz not kept echoing in my head. "Let me go, Magnolia," I said. "I'm not staying here another day." After being beaten by Baibars and looking death in the face, I felt that something within me had changed irreversibly. It was as if I had no more fear left inside me. One way or another, I didn't care. I was determined to dedicate what remained of my life to God. Whether this would be for a single day or for many more years to come did not matter. Shams of Tabriz had said that faith and love turned human beings into heroes because they removed all the fear and anxiety from their hearts. I was beginning to understand what he meant. And the strange thing is, Magnolia understood it, 2. She gave me a long, painful look and slowly moved aside, opening the way out for me. Ella. Northampton, June 19, 2008. Beloved Ella, thank you for being so compassionate. I'm glad you like my story and that you think about it a lot. I am not used to talking about my past with anyone, and it strangely makes me lighter to share all this with you. I spent the summer of 1977 with a group of Sufis in Morocco. My room was white, small, and simple. It had just the bare necessities: a sleeping mat, an oil lamp, an amber rosary, a potted flower by the window, an evil eye charm, and a walnut desk with a book of Rumi's poetry in the drawer. There was no telephone, no television, no clock, and no electricity. I didn't mind. Having lived in squat houses for years, I couldn't see why I shouldn't survive in a dervish lodge. On my first evening, Master Sameed came to my room to check on me. He said I was more than welcome to stay with them until ready to leave for Mecca. But there was one condition: no drugs. I remember feeling my face burn, like a child caught with his hand in the cookie jar. How did they know? Had they been rummaging through my suitcase while I was out? I'll never forget what the master said next: "We don't need to look through your belongings to know you are using drugs, Brother Craig. You have the eyes of an addict." And the funny thing is, Ella, until that day I had never thought of myself as an addict. I was so sure that I was in control and that drugs helped me with my problems. Numbing the pain is not the same as healing it, Master Sameed said. When the anesthesia wears off, the pain is still there. I knew he was right. With conceited determination I handed them all the drugs I carried with me, even my sleeping pills. But soon it became apparent that my determination was not strong enough to pull me through what was to come. During the 4 months I stayed in that small lodge, I broke my promise and strayed badly on more than a dozen occasions. For one who chose intoxication over sobriety, it wasn't hard to find drugs, even as a foreigner. One night I came to the lodge dead drunk and found all the doors bolted from inside. I had to sleep in the garden. The next day Master Sameed asked nothing, and I offered no apologies. Apart from these shaming incidents, I managed to get along fine with the Sufis, enjoying the calm that settled on the lodge in the evenings. Being there felt peculiar but oddly peaceful, and though I was no stranger to living under the same roof with many people, I found something there I had never experienced before: inner peace. On the surface we lived a collective life where everyone ate, drank, and performed the same activities at the same time, but underneath we were expected and encouraged to remain alone and look within. On the Sufi path, first you discover the art of being alone amid the crowd. Next you discover the crowd within your solitude, the voices inside you. While I waited for the Sufis in Morocco to safely sneak me into Mecca and Medina, I read extensively on Sufi philosophy and poetry, at first out of boredom and lack of anything better to do, then with growing interest. Like a man who had not realized how thirsty he was until he took his first sip of water, I found that my encounter with Sufism made me yearn for more. Of all the books I read that long summer, it was the collected poems of Rumi that had the most impact on me. 3 months later, out of the blue, Master Sameed said I reminded him of someone, a wandering dervish by the name of Shams of Tabriz. He said that some people regarded Shams as a brazen heretic, but if you asked Rumi, he was the moon and the sun. I was intrigued. But it was more than simple curiosity. As I listened to Master Sameed tell me more about Shams, I felt a shiver down my spine, an odd feeling of déjà vu. Now, you are going to think I'm crazy. But I swear to God, at that moment I heard a rustle of silk in the background, first far off, then drawing nearer, and I saw the shadow of someone who wasn't there. Perhaps it was the evening breeze moving across the branches, or maybe it was a pair of angel wings. Either way, I suddenly knew that I didn't need to go anywhere. Not anymore. I was sick and tired of always longing to be somewhere else, somewhere beyond, always in a rush despite myself. I was already where I wanted to be. All I needed was to stay and look within. This new part of my life I call my encounter with the letter F in the word Sufi. Love, Aziz Shams. Konya, February 1246. Bidding fair to be an eventful day, the morning proceeded faster than usual, and the sky hung low and grey. Late in the afternoon, I found Rumi in his room sitting by the window, his forehead creased in contemplation, his fingers moving restlessly over rosary beads. The room was dim on account of the heavy velvet curtains being half closed, and there was a strange wedge of daylight that fell upon the spot where Rumi sat, giving the whole scene a dreamy quality. I couldn't help but wonder whether Rumi would see the real intention behind what I was about to ask him to do, or would he be shocked and upset as I stood there absorbing the serenity of the moment, but also feeling slightly nervous. I had a glimpse of a vision. I saw Rumi, a much older and friendlier version of himself, clad in a dark green robe and sitting in exactly the same spot, looking more compassionate and generous than ever, but with a permanent scar on his heart in the shape of me. I understood two things at once, that Rumi would spend his old age here in this house, and that the wound left by my absence would never heal. Tears pricked in my eyes. "Are you all right? You look pale," said Rumi. I forced myself to smile, but the burden of what I was planning to say next weighed heavily on my shoulders. My voice came out a bit cranky and less forceful than I intended. "Not really. I am very thirsty, and there is nothing in this house to quench my thirst." "Would you like me to ask Kara what she can do about it?" Rumi asked. "No, because what I need is not in the kitchen. It is in the tavern. I am in the mood to get drunk, you see." I pretended not to notice the shadow of incomprehension that crossed Rumi's face, and I continued. "Instead of going to the kitchen for water, would you go to the tavern for wine?" "You mean, you want me to get you wine?" Rumi asked, pronouncing the last word cautiously, as if afraid of breaking it. "That's right. I'd so much appreciate it if you would get us some wine. 2 bottles would be enough, one for you, one for me. But do me a favor, please. When you go to the tavern, don't just simply get the bottles and come back. Stay there for a while. Talk to the people. I'll be waiting here for you. No need to rush." Rumi gave me a look that was half irritated, half bewildered. I recalled the face of the novice in Baghdad who had wanted to accompany me but cared too much about his reputation to take the plunge. His concern for the opinions of others had held him back. Now I wondered if his reputation was going to hold Rumi back, too. But to my great relief, Rumi stood up and nodded. "I have never been to a tavern before and have never consumed wine. I don't think drinking is the right thing to do. But I trust you fully, because I trust the love between us. There must be a reason you have asked me to do such a thing. I need to find out what that reason is. I'll go and bring us wine." With that, he said goodbye and walked out. As soon as he was out of the room, I fell to the ground in a state of profound ecstasy. Grabbing the amber rosary Rumi had left behind, I thanked God over and over again for giving me a true companion and prayed that his beautiful soul would never sober up from the drunkenness of divine love. Part 4. Fire. The things that damage, devastate, and destroy Suleiman the drunk. Konya, February 1246. Beguiled by wine, I have had many crazy delusions when drunk, but seeing the great Rumi enter the tavern door was really wild, even for me. I pinched myself, but the vision didn't vanish. "Hey, Christos, what did you serve me, man?" I yelled. That last bottle of wine must have been some mighty booze. You'd never guess what I'm hallucinating right now. Hush, you idiot, whispered someone from behind me. I looked around to see who was trying to quiet me and was stunned to find every man in the tavern, including Christos, gawking at the door. The whole place had plunged into an eerie silence, and even the tavern dog, Sequoia, seemed perplexed as he lay with his floppy ears glued to the floor. The Persian rug merchant stopped singing those awful melodies he called songs. Instead he swayed on his feet, holding his chin up with the overstated seriousness of a drunk who was trying to appear to be otherwise. It was Christos who broke the silence. "Welcome to my tavern, Malina," he said, his voice dripping with politeness. "It is an honor to see you under this roof. How may I help you?" I blinked repeatedly as it finally dawned on me that it really was Rumi standing there. "Thank you," Rumi said with a large but flat smile. "I'd like to get some wine." Poor Christos was so surprised to hear this that his jaw dropped. When he could move again, he ushered Rumi to the first available table, which happened to be next to mine. "Salamun alaikum," Rumi greeted me as soon as he sat down. I greeted him back and uttered a few pleasantries, but I am not sure the words came out right. With his tranquil expression, expensive robe, and elegant dark brown kaftan, Rumi looked totally out of place. I leaned forward and, dropping my voice to a whisper, said, "Would it be terribly rude if I ask what a man like you is doing here?" "I'm going through a Sufi trial," Rumi said, winking at me as if we were best friends. "I've been sent here by Shams so that I could have my reputation ruined." "And is that a good thing?" I asked. Rumi laughed. "Well, it depends on how you look at it. Sometimes it is necessary to destroy all attachments in order to win over your ego. If we are too attached to our family, our position in society, even our local school or mosque, to the extent that they stand in the way of union with God, we need to tear those attachments down." I wasn't sure I was following him correctly, but somehow this explanation made perfect sense to my addled mind. I had always suspected that these Sufis were a crazy, colorful bunch capable of all kinds of eccentricities. Now it was Rumi's turn to lean forward and ask in the same whispery tone, "Would it be terribly rude if I asked you how you got that scar on your face?" "It's not a very interesting story, I'm afraid," I said. "I was walking home late at night, and I bumped into this security guard who beat the crap out of me." "But why?" asked Rumi, looking genuinely concerned. "Because I had drunk wine," I said, pointing to the bottle that Christos had just placed in front of Rumi. Rumi shook his head. At first he seemed entirely befuddled, as if he didn't believe that such things could happen, but soon his lips twisted into a friendly smile. And just like that, we continued to talk. Over bread and goat cheese, we conversed about faith and friendship and other things in life that I thought I had long forgotten but was now delighted to rake up from my heart. Shortly after sunset Rumi rose to leave. Everyone in the tavern stood to bid him farewell. It was quite a scene. "You cannot leave without telling us why wine has been forbidden," I said. Christos ran to my side with a frown, worried that my question might annoy his prestigious customer. "Hush, Suleiman. Why do you have to ask such things?" "No, seriously," I insisted, staring at Rumi. "You have seen us. We are not evil people, but that is what they say about us all the time. You tell me, what is so wrong with drinking wine, provided we behave ourselves and don't harm anyone?" Despite an open window in the corner, the air inside the tavern had become musty and smoky, and suffused with anticipation. I could see that everyone was curious to hear the answer. Pensive, kind, sober, Rumi walked toward me, and here is what he said. "If the wine drink er has a deep gentleness in him, he will show that, when drunk. But if he has hidden anger and arrogance, those appear, and since most people do, wine is forbidden to everyone. There was a brief lull as we all contemplated these words. My friends, wine is not an innocent drink, Rumi addressed us in a renewed voice, so commanding and yet so composed and solid, because it brings out the worst in us. I believe it is better for us to abstain from drinking. That said, we cannot blame alcohol for what we are responsible for. It is our own arrogance and anger that we should be working on. That is more urgent. At the end of the day, whoever wants to drink will drink, and whoever wants to stay away from wine will stay away. We have no right to impose our ways on others. There is no compulsion in religion. This elicited heartened nods from some customers. I, for my part, preferred to raise my glass in my belief that no piece of wisdom should go unasked. You are a good man with a great heart, I said. No matter what people say about what you did today, and I'm sure they are going to say plenty, I think as a preacher it was very brave of you to come to the tavern and talk with us without judgment. Rumi gave me a friendly look. Then he grabbed the wine bottles he had left untouched and walked out into the evening breeze. Aladdin. Konya, February 1246. Besieged with anticipation, for the last 3 weeks I have been waiting to find the right moment to ask my father for Kaimaya's hand in marriage. I have spent many hours talking to him in my imagination, rephrasing the same sentences over and over, searching for a better way of expressing myself. I had an answer ready for every possible objection he could come up with. If he said that Kaimaya and I were like sister and brother, I would remind him that we were not bound by blood. Knowing how much my father loved Kaimaya, I was also planning to say that if he let us get married, she would not have to go and live anywhere else and could stay with us all her life. I had everything worked out in my mind, except I couldn't find a moment alone with my father. But then this evening I ran into him in the worst way possible. I was about to leave the house to meet with my friends when the door creaked open and in walked my father holding a bottle in each hand. I stood still, agape. Father, what is it that you are carrying? I asked. Oh, that. My father responded without the slightest trace of embarrassment. It's wine, my son. Is that so? I exclaimed. Is this what has become of the great Maulana? An old man blasted on. Wine. Watch your tongue, came a sulky voice from behind me. It was Shams. Staring into my face without so much as a blink, he said, that is no way to talk to your father. I'm the one who asked him to go to the tavern. Why am I not surprised? I couldn't help smirking. If Shams was offended by my words, he didn't show it. Aladdin, we can talk.